The novel is about a man, Jacob Bedford. He's a middle-aged man. At the start of the book, he arrives in Trieste to do a magazine piece about the city and to do research into the mystery of a lost ancestor. His life is in a state of flux and change. He is separated from his wife and living separately to his teenage sons. In Trieste, he meets two women, Jane and Charlotte. And over the course of the novel, which covers a period of just over a year, a bit more than that, he develops a friendship with the one and a love affair with the other. And the novel follows the unforeseen consequences of those relationships on his life. The novel is told entirely from the perspective of Jacob. He is the narrator, and it is through his lens that the story unfolds. So we only know as much as Jacob ever knows. We only discover what he discovers. Central to the story is the possibility of a crime. There's a trial there. So to this extent, the form also riffs on some of the traditional conventions of crime. But the third-person narration, third-person close-up narration by Jacob gives the novel a limited perspective. One of my preoccupations is the root of violence in the 20th century. And I was very interested in writing a story that explored the links between the mass madness, the mass psychosis of the slaughter of soldiers and civilians in the Second World War with the kind of individual psychosis and violence and madness that we know about today. And part of my thinking was informed by the psychoanalytic writings by Freud, of course. Another aspect that interested me, another theme I wanted to explore, was the way in which stories hold memory. Stories are legacy. Memory is legacy. So that through the novel, the question about how we know each other and the role that stories have to play is a recurring theme. A third theme that I wanted to explore is the question of parenting, what it might mean to be a good parent, what it might mean to be a parent, what it might mean to be a father separated from his children, and how we think about questions of mothering and parenting in this current moment in time. Trieste has always captured my imagination. First, through the stories I heard about Trieste and the stories I read about Trieste, not least the book by Jan Morris about Trieste, and because it's a place that I think figures large in the imaginations of many writers, because it was where James Joyce lived for many years. It's where he was in an exile, where he worked on the Dubliners and on Ulysses. It is also a place that was a busy and big port city. It was the main port city of Vienna when Trieste was part of the Habsburg Empire. It was a free port, which meant that it was a place where, regardless of your citizenship status, your race, your ethnicity, you could live freely. So Jewish people rubbed up alongside Slavs, who rubbed up alongside Greeks, Armenians, and it was a Babel. It was a Babel of many languages and many cultures. So in that way, it was also multicultural before the term was even coined, and that was fascinating to me. The French writer Marguerite Duras has been an enormous influence on my writing, not just for this novel, but for any piece of fiction in particular I've ever written. She was experimental, what we might define nowadays, and actually even then as experimental. She explored questions of selfhood, identity, eroticism, the female psyche in a prose that has been described as cracked lyricism. It's sensual, it's sensuous, it's full of ideas and emotion, but written in this very pared down, almost abstract style. So she's been important to me. Other writers that were important to me, particularly for the writing of this novel, were a number of male novelists. I wanted to read novels written by men that featured male narrators to help me with the character of Jacob. So in particular, the work of John Berger, his novel G, helped enormously. Berger is someone who mixes ideas about history, alongside questions about what you can know and about male passion, male eroticism. Michael Ondaatje, another one who writes about questions of history within the context of those that have been marginalized by history, by the normal grand narratives of history. He writes in a poetic, sensuous prose, again, moving, warm, generous. John Coetzee, another writer whose work I admire immensely, whose prose, whose style, whose spare, almost adamantine, lucid prose style helped me. Also, the way in which Coetzee is able to embody in his narratives a range of ideas, a range of uncertainties through the stories he tells about violence and about male violence and about male eroticism. So they were all important. Marguerite Yourcenar. She died in 1987. She was born in Belgium as Marguerite de Créancourt, changed her name. Yourcenar is a pseudonym. And she was the first woman ever to be elected to the prestigious Académie Française. She wrote a range of novels, mainly historical novels, essays, short stories, novellas. She was able again to embody ideas, to illuminate ideas through her historical writing that were extremely relevant to the late 20th century. Her most famous book, Memoirs of Hadrian, was about the emperor, the famous Roman emperor, Hadrian. So she exercised both her intellectual and her imaginative muscles across a range of periods, a range of peoples, a range of ideas. And I hope people pick up her work again